If we say the world is crazy, are we judging? No. It actually is crazy. So how is that not a judgment? What judgment really means in spiritual terms is to equate something that you see in another, a deficiency, a characteristic that is regarded as not so good, to equate that with who that person is in their essence, their identity. If you see unconsciousness in another human being, which you can do easily, unconscious behavior, either in an individual human being, they get insanely angry, they get depressed, they misinterpret everything, they project their insecurities onto you, they project their fears onto somebody else, they make enemies everywhere, complete. And when it would be absurd to say, oh no, this person is fine, I'm not judging you. But you can clearly see that the behavior is totally irrational and insane and creates continuous suffering for themselves and others. So you see that. Whether or not you verbalize it is secondary, but you see it, and you might say this person is unconscious, which it does not mean you equate their behavior or what they do with who they are. If you make an identity out of it, then it's a judgment. So if I said human beings are crazy, that would probably be a judgment. But if I see their behavior as crazy and realize that is the egoic mind operating in them, they are manifesting behavior that corresponds to the present evolutionary stage of human consciousness. It is not who they are. It is the way in which they manifest the unconsciousness that is still part of the collective human consciousness. That's all. So basically the answer is when it's not equated with who they are, when you are not making an identity for them out of whatever behavior they manifest, then it's not a judgment. The judgment becomes when you say he is or she is such and such. He's a liar, let's say that. He's a liar. That's the judgment. He often lies is not a judgment. Because you can see that the lying is something that is a manifestation of his egoic state of consciousness for him. He believes, presumably, that he can gain some advantage from telling things that are not true, enhancing himself or whatever. Many egos say things that are not true to enhance themselves, for example. But the moment I make it into an identity, he is a liar, that's a huge trap I have put myself in, not just him. I've put myself in because I've made an identity for another human being out of their unconscious behavior. Once I've done that, once I have attached a huge label, mental label, onto another human being, next time I meet this human being, I'm not really meeting them anymore. I'm meeting my judgment. I'm looking at them through the screen of the label that I have already given them, that I've mentioned to others. Do you know what you know that he's a liar, don't you? Yeah, okay, here. Next time he comes, you're not meeting a human being, you're meeting a liar. And by doing that, you have yourself reduced yourself. You get trapped in your own judgments. The way in which you relate to this person is diminished. You're not relating freely anymore to that person. You yourself become constrained by your judgments, because it will then control this, the mental concept will control your behavior towards him also. So, as that's why I believe it was Jesus said, when you judge, you judge yourself, or something like that. So there we need to be careful when we make pronouncements about others, when we transform their behavior that we deem unconscious into an identity for them. Now that becomes extreme when somebody is extremely unconscious. Even then it applies. He's a thief. Now it may be true that his living is by stealing things, but you need to be careful with these things, because it could be that this person suddenly realizes, perhaps in prison, realizes the transcendent dimension in him or her and wakes up. And even a murderer could wake up, and it has happened and does happen, that if they suffer enough, as they will, a moment comes, not necessarily in this lifetime, but for some it has come, they wake up. People who have murdered even more than one person, they wake up, and suddenly the unconditioned consciousness emerges, and it emerges because the suffering that they inflicted not only on others but on themselves through their actions was so extreme that the ego self-destructed. And then something emerges, and suddenly they wake up. Now, therefore, I would say, even to call someone a murderer is a judgment, but to say that, to recognize that this person may be dangerous, even to you, that he may need to be confined to prison because he's a danger to others, that's the case. But to impose, to make an identity, nobody is incapable of waking up. Even seemingly very evil people sometimes awaken, only through intense suffering in their case. But anytime we make an identity for a person out of something that they do, that becomes a huge limitation that we impose on them and on ourselves. So you see clearly what a person does, but it's not what this person essentially is. And the same applies to groups of people or humanity as a whole. If we say the world is crazy, which means, of course, human beings, the human beings are crazy, what we are saying is many human beings alive on this planet are still unconscious and manifest behavior that corresponds to their unconsciousness. They create suffering for themselves and others, and they know not what they do. And then when you hear this in the religious book, it says, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Really, forgive them means don't make an identity for them out of what they do. But don't deny it either. You don't say, oh no, this is fine, he just kills people, he's okay. So the deeper meaning of forgiving somebody is to recognize that in essence that's not who they are. Which does not mean that they do not have to suffer the consequences of their unconsciousness. That happens by itself. And sometimes the karmic consequences of a person's deep unconsciousness may come through the judicial system, and sometimes through other ways. Not that the judicial system is always just.